reaction from both sides of the aisle. Welcome back to America's Newsroom. I'm Sandra Smith.
And I'm John Scott, in for Bill Hemmer today. Lawmakers on the right and left raising concerns over President Trump's decision to stand by Saudi Arabia and its crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham insists, despite the White House decision, he will not work with the crown prince.
Saudi Arabia needs us more than we need them. It's not too much to ask an ally not to butcher a guy in a consulate. This is not World War II, so I'm not going to look away at what MBS did. We've got a historic opportunity here to tell the people in the Mideast there's a new sheriff in town. If you disrespect us and you trample over civilized norms, you're going to pay a price.
White House correspondent Kevin Corke joins us now live with more. So why has the White House decided to side with the Saudis?
Well, I think, frankly, John, it's a couple things. On the one hand, they say, or at least you heard the president say himself, there is no absolute certainty as for who was behind the murder of the Saudi national, the journalist Jamal Khashoggi, who obviously had his work appear in the Washington Post. But I think the other thing is there's this sense that you don't want to wreck U.S. interests in the region, both strategic and financial, in particular when you consider Iran and their position in that part of the world and how important Saudi Arabia has been. And as I pointed out, financial. In fact, let me take you to Twitter and share just a bit of what the president had to say about the Saudi kingdom today, which sort of seems to go in the direction of our financial interests. He wrote this: oil prices getting lower. Great. Like a big tax cut for America and the world. Enjoy. $54 was just $82. Thank you to Saudi Arabia, but let's go lower. Now, this comes, John, amid growing consensus that the Saudi crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, may have orchestrated Khashoggi's murder, something that he has strongly and repeatedly denied. And the president, despite analysis from the intel community, isn't ready to blame Riyadh.
They didn't make a determination. And it's just like I said, I think it was maybe he did, maybe he didn't. They did not make that assessment. The CIA has looked at it. They've studied it a lot. They have nothing definitive. And the fact is, maybe he did, maybe he didn't.
John, you and I have talked about this over on Capitol Hill. There is very strong disagreement over the U.S.'s position in this particular case. You just mentioned Lindsey Graham. Let me show you this from Rand Paul. He is also disappointed with the administration's unwillingness to harshly criticize the Saudis. He says, I'm pretty sure this statement, talking about the White House's statement, is Saudi Arabia first, not America first. I'm also pretty sure John Bolton wrote it. So some sharp elbows in the nation's capital over this one, John.
Also at the White House, the New York Times is reporting the president wanted his Department of Justice to prosecute Hillary Clinton and James Comey. Why?
Yeah, well, listen, he's not the only one in Washington who believes that either or both Comey and Clinton may have actually broken the law. And maybe he's asking the question, it has been suggested to me by White House officials, why wouldn't the DOJ investigate something like that? Why wouldn't they at least at a minimum try to get to the bottom of it? But this is actually problematic, though, John, if you really think about how Washington works, because there's a learning curve. Granted, when you're a president, maybe you don't know that there are a lot of dangers in this town, talking about Washington politics. And so you can't just sort of have bluster about things that should happen or maybe things that you feel like might happen. But I also think, fairly speaking, that doesn't necessarily rise to the level of a specific command. Still, this is important, John. Make no mistake about it. If the president said it, it's deadly serious. And it would appear that then White House counsel Don McGahn thought enough of the threat or the possibility thereof to pen a warning detailing what might happen if it was thought that the president was using the full weight of the Department of Justice to pursue his political enemies. And you and I have talked about that on a number of occasions, not just with this president. There have been suggestions that President Obama had done that. So you want to be very, very careful, and certainly Don McGahn was. As for the day here in South Florida, the president out on the golf course as well. I would be if I weren't working. Back to you.
Sounds like a good day to do that. It's getting a little chilly up here in the Northeast. Kevin Corke, thank you.
On to this Fox News alert. Questions answered. President Trump submitting written responses to special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation, causing his attorneys to call for the end to the probe. Catherine Herridge is live in Washington with more on this. Catherine.
Well, thanks, Sandra. This morning, there is a mixed legal assessment, with a former prosecutor telling Fox News the data points indicate the special counsel investigation is now winding down.
The other things we see are, for example, special counsel Mueller is evidently going to allow General Flynn to be sentenced. It looks like Manafort is heading towards sentencing. I can tell you as an experienced former prosecutor that if you're intending to bring another big case and you think you have these witnesses who would be cooperating witnesses in that case, you don't let them get sentenced.
A leading constitutional law expert is very focused on any potential inconsistencies in the president's written answers, arguing that that may lead to persistent legal exposure. Jonathan Turley writing, if Trump answers with any specificity, his responses will be overlaid with the testimony of a host of cooperating witnesses, from former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn to former Trump fixer Michael Cohen. If statements by Trump do not match up, Congress will then be left with a stark choice over who is lying on the issue. Late yesterday, the president's legal team issued this brief statement confirming the president's written responses are now with special counsel Robert Mueller. Significantly, the questions dealt with Russia-related topics and not the firing of former FBI Director James Comey that might be part of any obstruction investigation. Quote, it has been our position from the outset that much of what has been asked raised serious constitutional issues and was beyond the scope of a legitimate inquiry, Rudy Giuliani wrote. This remains our position today. The president has nonetheless provided unprecedented cooperation. The legal team also emphasized that to date they have provided more than 30 witnesses on a voluntary basis, more than 1.4 million records, and now the president's written responses. Shortly before the confirmation from his legal team, the president fielded reporter questions on the White House lawn.
The written answers to the witch hunt that's been going on forever. No collusion, no nothing. They've been finished. Finished them yesterday. The lawyers have them. I assume they'll turn them in today or soon.
The other thing we're watching today is really the first public policy speech from the acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker. He is in New York City speaking to the JTTF, that's the Joint Terrorism Task Force on National Security Matters. Whitaker, of course, is central to this because he now oversees the Robert Mueller investigation. That position was previously held by the Deputy Attorney General, who was passed over to temporarily lead the department. Sandra.
Catherine Herridge, thank you.
You're welcome.
For more on all of this, let's bring in senior writer at the Weekly Standard, John McCormick. Let's start with the president's decision on Saudi Arabia, John. He's taking a lot of heat for standing by Mohammed bin Salman, even though the CIA has concluded there's a pretty good likelihood that bin Salman was behind the murder of Jamal Khashoggi.
Yeah, I think there are a few problems with the president's statement. The first is that the CIA has reportedly determined with a high degree of confidence that Mohammed bin Salman was in fact behind this murder. President Trump cast doubt on American intelligence. I don't think that is in the American interest, the national interest. Furthermore, the president, the decision to not cut off all arms sales to Saudi Arabia is defensible. It's a wise decision, but I think the president has sort of cast this false choice between either all or nothing. The idea that we would have to, completely cut off ties or cut off arms sales to Saudi Arabia or doing nothing. That's the way he's framed it. I think there are measures that could have been taken. Some diplomatic price could have been paid. Some economic price could have been paid. But the president has chosen to impose no sanction, no price on Mohammed bin Salman. I thought the statement was a statement of weakness, not of strength. The premise here was that if we did anything, made Mohammed bin Salman pay any price, that this would somehow jeopardize American interests, as if we're the junior partner here and we have more to lose than they do. So I do think that those were a few different problems with his statements. President Trump, for whatever reason, seems to believe that you need to almost actively praise brutal dictators like Kim Jong-un to have a working relationship with them. Obviously there are times when you need to make hard-headed decisions, but you can still speak the truth about human dignity, human rights. President Reagan knew how to do that. President Trump either doesn't know how to do that or doesn't want to.
The newspaper that covers the nation's business doesn't seem to think much of the president's approach. The Wall Street Journal writing, from Mr. Trump's point of view, U.S. interests in the Middle East can be reduced to arms deals, oil, and Iran. That is crass. No other word suffices. You're saying the president should have reached out, done something to punish the Saudis for what happened here.
Yeah, I think there should have been some price, and I agree with the Journal in particular. The president's remarks about the number of jobs and the amount of money the United States is going to get from these arms deals was crass and grotesque. The United States has a strategic alliance based on our national interests with Saudi Arabia, and as I said, it would be foolish to completely end that over this. But again, some price could have been paid by Mohammed bin Salman. The president has chosen to make him pay no price.
Let's turn our attention to the Mueller investigation and the president now having answered at least some of Robert Mueller's questions on paper. Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, was speaking to the Axios news site and said this: any question he has on obstruction, the president has given the answers in interviews, tweets. Other witnesses have given it to him, meaning Mueller, and the law definitely requires that if you're going to subpoena a president, you have to show that you can't get the information anywhere else. Rudy Giuliani seems to think that the president is avoiding any future trouble, any indictment, impeachment, any of those things from the Mueller investigation.
Well, if what Rudy Giuliani said is true, then it's going to make it very difficult for any Democrats who hope to impeach him. The Democrats, we just held an election. Democrats obviously won the House. They did so while running away from impeachment. Joe Biden said they shouldn't go after impeachment. Nancy Pelosi, just in the past week, sort of mocked those who are interested in impeachment. So Robert Mueller is going to have to reveal something new and something substantial. Obviously, we should wait to see what the facts are. But if what Rudy Giuliani said is true, that nothing that he revealed in this in these questions and answers is anything that he hasn't already tweeted or said hasn't been reported in the news, then this isn't going to be enough, I think, for Democrats to go down the road of impeachment.
But does Robert Mueller have to come up with some kind of collusion case to justify the whole investigation with which he was charged?
No, I mean, he was charged with investigating Russian interference, and anything that came out of that. Obviously, they've indicted a lot of Russians who did meddle in this election. They have found other crimes that have been committed, and he's now obviously pursuing also obstruction charges. These investigations can go off in different directions. Just ask Bill Clinton when the first investigation started about Whitewater, ended up with Monica Lewinsky. So we shouldn't make any determination until the report's actually out.
John McCormick, Weekly Standard. John, thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy Pelosi picking up a key endorsement in her bid to become House Speaker. Who is backing her now, and how that support could impact the effort to oppose her speakership?
Plus, as House Democrats look to investigate Ivanka Trump's use of a personal email account in the White House, the president is defending his daughter, making it clear there are real differences between her case and the other one that he made a rallying cry.
There was no deleting like Hillary Clinton did. There was no servers in the basement like Hillary Clinton had. You're talking about you're talking about all fake news.
Fox News alert: a top Republican in Congress saying his committee will look into allegations that Ivanka Trump sent hundreds of messages about government business from her personal account. Outgoing House Oversight Committee Chairman Trey Gowdy calling on the White House to provide more information on this, writing to Chief of Staff John Kelly, quote, Mrs. Trump's use of personal email account for official communications may implicate the Presidential Records Act and other security and record-keeping requirements. Joining us now, Congressman Mark Walker, incoming House GOP Conference Vice Chair and member of the House Oversight Committee. Congressman, thank you for your time this morning. Where do you stand on what should happen? We heard from your colleague, Trey Gowdy. Where do you stand on what should happen next based on what we're learning about Ivanka Trump and her use of private email for government business?
I certainly support Chairman Gowdy's position on this. Our job is to gather data and gather records, and you are subject to oversight anytime that you're using your personal email to conduct any form of government business. Now, I know my friends on the left are running around with their hair on fire right now, but so far as we know, there's no secret server in the bathroom. There's no acid wash or bleach bidding going on. And this ultimately, not to rehash it, this was about Hillary Clinton's human struggle in life to be able to tell the truth.
So you're clearly marking the distinction between what has been reported about her use of an email and Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server, and which was thousands of emails, obviously, that we're referencing there versus the hundreds here. So, but you think it's reasonable to request more information?
It's not only reasonable, Sandra, it's our job. It's part of the House oversight, the oversight, government, and reform. That's what we do. Right now, it's just record keeping. It's data collecting. We'll get that information and follow through on it. But whether it's Republican or Democrat, that's our position to follow through on such incidents or matters.
Yeah, we talked to Ari Fleischer earlier on this, and his sentiment was similar. And he also made the point to use common sense here based on what we're hearing and what is reported. Listen.
Use some common sense here. If this was thousands or tens of thousands, then I think you have a real pattern that lasted a long time if we're trying to get around the rules. This sure doesn't sound like that to me.
So we will see where that goes, but where does this go next? The latest in the Democrat leadership fight. Nancy Pelosi wants that gavel again. What do you see happening next when it comes to Democrat leadership in the House?
Well, I saw that where she picked up an endorsement from former President Obama just yesterday. We're not surprised that a lot of moderate Democrats do not want Nancy Pelosi as their speaker due to her hard left progressive policies. But I look forward to working with our conference chair, Liz Cheney, and continuing to get our message of strong defense, specifically in the areas of poverty. Think about this one data point. 10 to 12 million people under the Obama administration were driven into poverty. In the last year and a half, we've been able to rescue 4 million of those due to great economic policies. I know Liz Cheney is going to do a great job. I look forward to supporting her and making sure that people understand the good news that we're trying to accomplish as Republicans in D.C.
Meanwhile, I want to ask you about what is next when it comes to Matthew Whitaker, the acting AG. Obviously, a lot of criticism there over the past and what he has said about the Robert Mueller probe. House Republicans, meanwhile, urging House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy and other House Republicans, calling on the president to name John Ratcliffe Attorney General. Where do you stand on that, and what more can you tell us?
Listen, I have no closer friend in the House than John Ratcliffe, but it goes well beyond just a friendship. If you look at his vast experience, we would not know about some of the DOJ and FBI abuses had it not been some of his questioning with Comey and Strzok. This is a guy who's not timid, yet he is measured in his comments, and this is the kind of individual that I believe has the integrity and character to fill such a position. I certainly join Kevin McCarthy, Mark Meadows, and many others who would recommend John Ratcliffe for Attorney General to the president.
Interesting. Congressman Mark Walker, thank you for your time this morning, sir. Have a good holiday.
You too. Thanks.
Fox News alert: thousands of would-be immigrants at the doorstep of the United States. And according to DHS, thousands more are still headed this way. What Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen is saying about the caravans. A live report ahead. A stern message being sent to migrant caravans. The Homeland Security Secretary saying they will not get into our country illegally. Thousands are making the trip to the U.S.-Mexico border, planning to claim asylum when they get there. Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen calling it a crisis.
I'm here to tell you today that the reality is that there are currently over 6,200 individuals camped out south of the U.S. border in Tijuana today as I stand here. In Mexicali, there are more than 3,000 caravan members. The crisis is real, and it is just on the other side of this wall.
Casey Stiegel live in Dallas with the latest. Casey.
Yeah, John, the Secretary's comments there, as you know, come on the heels of that federal court ruling, essentially halting the president's proclamation, the one the president signed in response to that caravan, basically stating that they and others could not claim asylum unless they entered the United States through an authorized port of entry. Well, that federal judge out in California disagreed, saying in part from the ruling, and I'm quoting here, whatever the scope of the president's authority, he may not rewrite the immigration laws to impose a condition that Congress has expressly forbidden. Then the president weighed in.
The Ninth Circuit is really something we have to take a look at because it's not fair. You people know better than anybody what's happening. It's a disgrace. In my opinion, it's a disgrace.
Now, the ruling came from the U.S. District Court in San Francisco. The Ninth Circuit, though, is the appellate court in California, which hears cases from 9 western states. But as this judicial side plays out, roughly 5,900 active duty troops will spend their holiday now deployed and working along the entire southern border, working with Customs and Border Protection and U.S. Border Patrol. The bulk of those soldiers are based right here in Texas because the Rio Grande Valley is known as the epicenter. It has the highest number of apprehensions when it comes to the smuggling of people, weapons, and drugs into the homeland. John.
Casey Stiegel in Dallas. Thanks. And stick around. At the bottom of the hour, we'll get reaction from the former acting director of Immigrations and Custom Enforcement, Tom Homan.
We look forward to that. Meanwhile, President Trump catching heat on all sides for giving Saudi Arabia a pass over the killing of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi. We are live from London with global reaction to that next.
It's a very complex situation. It's a shame, but it is what it is. The CIA has looked at it. They've studied it a lot. They have nothing definitive.
Hello, Mom.
Amanda's mom's appointment just got rescheduled for today. Amanda needs right at home. Our customized care plan provides as much or as little help as her mom requires, whether it's a ride to the doctor or help around the house.
Oh, of course. Tom, I am really sorry. I've got to go.
Look, call right at home.
Get the right care right at home.
It was more than a 550-point drop for the Dow, and now a little bit of a recovery here today. Triple-digit gain on the Dow, up 170 points. All of this as White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow dismisses concerns about the economy, saying, quote, "The recession is so far in the distance, I can't see it." And that has been his message all along. He maintains that the growth that we have seen in the U.S. economy is sustainable. So we'll see. But there's a little bit of worry right now. And Charles Payne was on with us earlier talking about the worries about the Fed.
Yeah.
Maria Bartiromo seems pretty optimistic. We had her in the 9 o'clock hour, but based on what she's hearing, that the economic growth can continue. The stock market might be taking a break, but that can continue as well.
It was the big tech companies that took the market on that big upswing, and now those tech companies have kind of taken it on the downswing too.
A lot of them. Facebook, Amazon, and a lot of the retailers are in focus as we head into the holiday shopping season. Target missed expectations, but overall their numbers and their outlook was pretty positive. So we'll see how this all plays out, but the Dow enjoying a nice gain at the moment.
All right.
Meanwhile, more outrage after President Trump decides not to punish the Saudi crown prince as we learn more details of the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. Turkey right now accusing the U.S. of turning a blind eye to human rights violations, dismissing the president's statement on the issue as, quote, comic. The president defending his decision.
It's America first for me. It's all about America first. We're not going to give up hundreds of billions of dollars in orders and let Russia, China, and everybody else have them. It's all about, for me, very simple. It's America first.
Benjamin Hall live from our London bureau with more reaction to this. Benjamin.
Hi, Sandra. President Trump's statement yesterday was certainly intended to be the final word on this. And he said, as you heard there, why. For him, national security is more important than anything else. But also, we're seeing major backlash both in the U.S. and now abroad. While that statement was being given, the Turkish foreign minister was actually in Washington, and he met with Secretary Pompeo soon after it was announced. He said that the killing of Khashoggi should not be covered up for the sake of maintaining trade ties with Saudi Arabia.
This is a humanitarian issue. It is a murder. We cannot say our trade will increase. Let's cover it up. Let's ignore it.
Other politicians in Turkey accused the U.S. of turning a blind eye to the murder, and they said they would now push for an international investigation. There was also a response from Iran, the foreign minister tweeting, Mr. Trump bizarrely devotes the first paragraph of his shameful statement on Saudi atrocities to accuse Iran of every sort of malfeasance he can think of. Perhaps we're also responsible for the California fires.
The White House has always viewed Saudi Arabia as a key partner on all Middle East issues, and many now wonder if, following this statement, Saudi Arabia will be working even closer with the US towards issues such as Palestinian peace deals, the Yemeni ceasefire, pushing back against Iran, and always, as importantly, lowering oil prices. And that cooperation is what many people will be looking for now, particularly when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian peace deal, which we expect to get more information on in the coming months. Saudi Arabia, a key player in that, as with so many other issues. So now people are watching to see if the cooperation between the two countries will grow as a result. Sandra?
Benjamin Hall in London for us. Thank you.
For more on this now, let's bring in Peter Brooks. He's a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation's National Security Affairs area, also former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. I want to play for you some more of the president talking about this decision he's made regarding Saudi Arabia, and then I'll get your reaction on the other side. Okay. Listen to this.
I'm not going to tell a country that's spending hundreds of billions of dollars and has helped me do one thing very importantly, keep oil prices down so that they're not going to $100 and $150 a barrel. Right now, we have oil prices in great shape. I'm not going to destroy the world economy, and I'm not going to destroy the economy for our country by being foolish with Saudi Arabia.
So it comes down to economics for the president. What do you think of that decision, Peter?
Well, look, this is a very tough situation. The president laid that out. It's a terrible human tragedy. It's a terrible political crisis as well for the United States and even beyond the United States internationally. And it's going to be very difficult for the administration to walk a line on this. I mean, we need to stand up for human rights. We need to be concerned about authoritarianism in the Middle East. But there's also a number of other issues, John, as you're well aware. The Iranian expansionism, Middle East peace process, Saudi Arabia's role in the Middle East in countering violent extremism. So there's a lot of issues here. This is not easy at all. And rhetorically, it's going to be difficult to deal with this. The Congress is not going to allow this to be the end of the story, and I don't think it is the end of the story. Congress has sent letters to the president, especially the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, asking the administration to act on the Global Magnitsky Act, which could require action against the Crown Prince. So this story is not over by any stretch, and it's going to be very difficult for the United States and the international community to manage this, considering the challenges we face.
The Magnitsky Act is named after a Russian lawyer who died while in custody. For viewers who may not know, I mean, a lot of Vladimir Putin's political enemies end up dead, and yet you don't have members of Congress right now, you know, rallying to break off relations with Russia. Is there sometimes a double standard in Washington on these issues?
Well, I think that we have to be very cautious not to politicize this issue, right? And that's in fact, a lot of the commentators I've seen from the political sphere, they've offered a lot of criticism and very little advice or ways to deal with this. They understand, I think, in their heart of hearts that this is a very difficult situation, and some action has already been taken. The United States has sanctioned some under the Magnitsky Act in Saudi Arabia. Some of those have already been accused. That does not include the Crown Prince so far. We've stopped fueling Saudi aircraft. Arms sales could be on the table, but the challenge here is because of the challenges we face internationally in this world that seems to be in such tumult. That we have to also look at our national security interests as we go forward on this. At the same time, looking at us as a beacon of human rights and democracy in the world.
Yeah, the Secretary of State referenced the fact that Saudi Arabia is essentially a bulwark against Iran and its interests in talking about this case. Here's what Mike Pompeo had to say.
It's a mean, nasty world out there. The Middle East in particular, there are important American interests to keep the American people safe. The United States will continue to have a relationship with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They're an important partner of ours. We will do that with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, its people. That is the commitment that the President made today. It's that straightforward.
It sounds as though you essentially agree with the Secretary of State's point.
Yes, I think so. I mean, I didn't see everything. I mean, I saw your clip there. I didn't see everything that he said about it. But yes, this is very difficult. And when you look around the world, we have to deal with Russia. We have to deal with China. Look at the human rights situation in China. You know, a quarter of the world's people that live under a repressive regime over there. But yes, this is a terrible human tragedy. There are things that can be done. And I think the administration will act on that. They're still gathering information, I think. I mean, we heard about the CIA assessment. I didn't see it. I don't think you saw it. We're getting that through secondhand sources in terms of what that has said. But yeah, there's a lot of interest, and as the president is right, this is very, very complex. But it is, like I said, a terrible human tragedy and a terrible political crisis for the United States. And I don't think we've seen the end of this story and the actions that the United States and others may take as well. I mean, what are others doing on this issue that are criticizing us at the same time that they're, they may be not doing as much themselves.
Peter Brooks at the Heritage Foundation. Peter, thank you.
Thank you, John.
President Trump not backing down after a federal judge blocks his decision to deny illegal immigrants asylum. What this means as we move closer to a showdown at the border.
These are tough people that are coming in. Now I understand they have 500 people that have been designated as, let's put it in a nice word, criminals. And these are the people that are coming in. No, you don't have people coming in.
Pay attention.
Only days left for you to become a Fox Nation founder.
Get new can't-miss live opinion shows daily and documentaries and specials that tell the real stories behind the headlines.
Exclusively on Fox Nation.
Plus, get limited time available.
Filed in the Ninth Circuit, we get beaten, and then we end up having to go to the Supreme Court like the travel ban, and we won. In my opinion, it's a disgrace what happens with the Ninth Circuit. We will win that case in the Supreme Court.
President Trump vowing to take his fight all the way to the Supreme Court after a federal judge issues a nationwide injunction against the president's plan to refuse asylum to immigrants who illegally cross the southern border. Let's bring in former acting ICE Director Thomas Homan. Thomas, good morning to you. And you and I have a chat to talk. We chat often, I should say. And something tells me you're not surprised at all by this judge's decision.
No, about 2 weeks ago, I told you this would happen. When the president first came out with the proclamation, I was asked by Fox News how long it would take to get a lawsuit, and I said within 24, 48 hours. I mean, the Ninth Circuit has shown over and over again that they don't believe in the rule of law. I mean, look, the reason the caravans here to begin with, we got one Ninth Circuit court judge says we can't detain families more than 20 days. We got another Ninth Circuit judge say you can't separate families. Well, now we got another Ninth Circuit judge saying you can go ahead and violate laws of this country, enter this country illegally, which is a crime. 8 United States 1325, for those who want to look it up. It's a crime to enter this country illegally. And your own cameras were inside the caravan. Many of those folks saying they have been deported once before and they're coming back. When you re-enter the United States after being formally deported once, that is a felony. And we have more than 500 criminals in this group. So we just opened the gate. So now you can enter illegally, get the same due process as those who come through the port of entry doing it the right way.
And I know that you believe that this judge's ruling and the effect that it will have, you believe that it will have negative consequences in that it will encourage others to follow.
Absolutely. When we fought the case on the Florida settlement agreement about keeping families in detention more than 20 days, my affidavit read, if we can only keep families for less than 20 days, we will surge illegal entry of family units. I was called a fearmonger. But you know what? Unfortunately, I was right. Numbers of families surged. Based on this ruling, there's going to be more caravans. Instead of waiting in line like they were going to do in the safety and security of a port of entry protected by law enforcement, now we're going to talk more caravans come, enter illegally, put themselves in the hands of criminal organizations. We're going to bankroll smuggling organizations. We bankroll drug cartels who control the corridors heading to the border. And these people are put at risk. Women will be raped. People will die crossing the border. Children will drown. People will be misused by these criminal organizations. As we've seen over and over again last year and a half, how many people have died at the hands of these criminals. We just put them out of the safety of a port of entry and tell them it's okay to enter illegally and hire a criminal organization.
Well, those are obviously very dire warnings there about the consequences of this decision. I know that you've got the ear of the president, and we heard the president just a few moments ago vowing immediate action on this. He says that he's going to put in a major complaint about the appellate court, but this could obviously go to the Supreme Court. Does ultimately the administration win this case, Thomas?
I think they do, because if you look at the justification he used for this proclamation 212F, it's the same general legal justification he used for what they call the travel ban, which he eventually won in the Supreme Court. Now look, they're going to appeal this to the Ninth Circuit. We're certainly not going to get any relief from them. But then you appeal it to the Supreme Court. The problem is it's going to take months. And in that months, more people are going to come to this country illegally and violate our laws. Congress has failed to close the loopholes. They failed to give ICE enough funding to detain all these people. It's going to be a surge until we finally can get this fixed with the Supreme Court.
Meanwhile, that caravan moves closer to our southern border. What ultimately will that showdown look like when and if it happens, Thomas?
Well, you got thousands of professional law enforcement officers down there. The men and women of the Border Patrol, I've said it many times, they're American patriots, right? They strap a gun to their hip. They stand on that front line and defend this nation. They're professionals. They'll handle this very well. But the thing we have to do, and the president has said they're going to do it, we have to detain these people. If they want due process, we'll give them due process. We'll put them in front of a judge. But we have to detain them until we see a judge. Because 85 to 90% will lose their cases based on recent data. And when they get a final order of removal, they need to get on a plane and go home, which sends a strong message to Central America.
I think earlier it's important to point out that we've heard a lot of legal experts weighing in on this, but Alan Dershowitz was on Fox News earlier this morning talking about how this asylum case is different than the travel ban case, an important distinction to be made here. Final thoughts after this. Listen.
It's not like the travel ban. The travel ban, the president was explicitly authorized by statute to decide which countries to prohibit immigration from. On asylum, the president doesn't have that authority statutorily, but he has the broad constitutional authority to control our borders.
And in this joint statement by Homeland Security and the Justice Department, they say that the Supreme Court had already shown the president had the legal right to restrict asylum. Final thoughts from you.
Well, look, it goes back to 212F for the statute. I think Congress has given the president authority to do this. I'm not a lawyer. I'm certainly not as smart as Mr. Dershowitz. But, you know, being in this game for 34 years, I certainly know the statute. I think we'll ultimately prevail in this, and I hope we prevail, and we got to prevail quickly. So the government needs to appeal as quick as possible and get this fixed. But in the meantime,
you got to get your final thoughts.
In the meantime, Congress needs to fix the loopholes. Congress is sitting back watching this game. They could fix this tomorrow if they wanted to. So a lot of this is the blame of Congress' failure to act.
Something we have heard from you before. Thomas Homan, thank you for coming on this morning. Good to see you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
You too.
Well, airports and passengers are bracing for delays. The number of people flying up more than 5% from last Thanksgiving. Your holiday travel report straight ahead. AAA predicting the busiest Thanksgiving in more than a decade. The economy might have something to do with that. Some 54 million Americans expected to leave home. Mike Tobin live at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. Mike?
Well, John, it's going to be another record-setting holiday travel weekend with travel up 5.4%. This is going to mean about 500,000 more people going through security, more than 4 million people nationwide going through security. But as I back out of the way and give you a look at the line here at O'Hare, every year when we do this live shot, you never see the big backup, and that's because TSA knew Thanksgiving was coming about a year ago. They budget for it. They blow out the overtime. They max out the positions, and they keep the lines moving. Still, however, TSA is asking people to get to the airports early.
We recommend that you arrive at least 2 hours before your flight. We're going to have additional hours. We're going to have all lanes operational. We're going to have an overtime budget that has been allocated for additional hours. And we're going to make sure that we process our passengers not only safely, but also efficiently.
And as we go to the misery map from FlightAware.com, the misery is in red, and you see that things just aren't that miserable. Not a whole lot in the way of delays. Things are They look like any other travel day, again, because they were able to plan ahead. There's not too much bad weather right now. If you are traveling by road, you should be pretty happy with how things go there as well. GasBuddy.com was predicting that travel would be down about 15% this holiday weekend. However, gas prices took a big dive in October. So a lot of people are going to look at the gas prices, decide they can fill up the tank anyway. However, before October, gas prices were pretty high, a little higher than usual. And so you're still going to expect to see traffic a little lighter than normal. John?
Let's hope things continue to move smoothly there, right behind you. Thanks very much, Mike Tobin.
There you go.
The special counsel's probe now winding down after the president gives Robert Mueller the written answers to his questions. So where do both sides go from here?